So welcome everyone. Welcome to Sunday Afternoon Talk. We welcome all our viewers joining us online and on our Facebook page. This is really our second talk, our second Sunday Afternoon Talk. I mean, you would have, those who follow us will know that we've got other segments that we've been running. They've been going on for a while, but with Sunday Afternoon Talk, this is our very second conversation, and we're quite excited about the topic that we're uncovering today and the guest that we have. But maybe before I introduce the guest, what I want to do is just to say a bit about Sunday Afternoon Talk for those who may not know. So Sunday Afternoon Talk really is targeted at three groups of people: authors, artists, and Kingdom Focused initiatives. And the idea is that we want to profile all of these groups of people, and provide platforms really for people to share testimonies of God's grace, so that other people may be inspired and motivated. And therefore, we've invited a very exciting guest. She's an author, but you'll hear from her. I'm sure there's many other things that she has done or is doing. I want to, with that, welcome Sis Andiswa. So welcome, Sis Andiswa.
Thank you so much, Kaya, for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. The privilege and the honor is all ours. We have seen and read parts of your book, and it's quite exciting, really. And I'm sure our viewers will be very excited to hear more about it. But before we talk about the contents of the book, what I want to do is maybe for the viewers to know who we are speaking to, get to know the person behind the book, and So please tell us. So who is Andiswa? You give a background, studies, family, career, and other things that you may be doing before we, just for our viewers to know you better. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaya. I'd like to greet the viewers that are online as well. My name is Andiswa Oludare. For my name, Andiswa Jezile, because now I'm married. I grew up in Engcobo, a town in the Eastern Cape, raised by my mom and my dad from a family of 4, and I was the oldest. I studied my higher education, starting from Maria Zell, which is my high school. It's in the Eastern Cape in Matatela, and from there I went to KwaZulu-Natal to do pharmacy there.
Okay.
And I'm sure it's the story about that. It's not as simple as that. It didn't happen like that chronologically. But yes, we can talk more about that in the book, when we discuss the book. I got born again. I studied pharmacy at UKZN. So now I'm a qualified pharmacist. The most important thing that happened to me at KZN University is that I found Christ, or rather he found me.
Yes.
So I got born again in 2005. Yes. So a lot of my life story, things that I've done, have been determined by that point. It was like a turning point, as it is for most people anyway. Yes. So yeah, currently I'm married. I got married in 2016. I live with my husband and 2 children, 2 girls. I currently work as a pharmacist for a company called Organon. On the side, just after I got married, I've had this idea. I love reading books.
Sure.
Because of the things that I'd gone through in life. I felt like after marriage, the best thing for me to do would be to look back and record it. Sure. And pass it on to someone, because I believe that there are many ways that we can learn about the future. You can learn from experience, which is the hard way, or we can learn from others. We ask those who've gone ahead of us, or we observe their lives, and then we learn from that. And it saves us a lot of time wasted and also a lot of pain. Sure. So I felt like I'd wasted a lot of time, and also, obviously, that's not how God views it. Yeah. And also, I felt as though I had a lot of bruises or scars along the way. So I wanted to look back at someone let's say my children, since I'm raising girls as well, and say that I can pass something on to them so that they don't have to go through what I went through. They can make wiser decisions. Hence the book that I wrote called The Waiting. The other things that I do on the side, one of the things that I battled with in my journey called life, I was on identity. I wanted to know, who am I? You know, that question seemed to bother me a lot. And it looked like it seemed as though it kept changing, you know. So I wanted to find out, who am I? And thank God I found that in Christ. And so I started one day I was having a conversation with, in most seasons of my life, there usually are people that God brings into my life, like maybe young girls or young grown-up women. And one of these young women, we're having a conversation once, and I found myself defending her identity. And I said something along the lines of, you should never allow anyone to color you in any color but royal. And what I meant by that is, only God has a right to tell you who you are. Anyone else doesn't. So from there, God allowed me to birth a ministry called Color Me Royal. So what Color Me Royal, basically in one word or two words, it's hands and feet of Jesus. So whatever he wants us to do, whether it's supporting orphanages, whether it's hosting conferences or talk shows or anything else, we do that. Whatever we feel he's saying that we should do at that time, we are the hands and feet of Jesus. So that's the work that I've done. I believe there's so many other things, but we don't have to be mentioning all of those. But yeah, that's my current work, basically.
Well, lovely. Thank you so much for that. In fact, my next question was going to be about the inspiration behind. I mean, you've mentioned a number of things, which I'll also touch on in some of the questions I'll ask later on. But one of the first things I wanted to talk to was the inspiration behind the book before we get into the book itself. But you started to touch on that, and I did see even some reference in your book where you say, you know, I think that the quotation, in fact, I don't know if I have it here, where you talk about, you know, the purpose of sharing a story, you know, the scars that you bear and how that can help others. I mean, that's quite powerful, because a lot of us go through many different things, but I don't know if many of us are, one, comfortable enough to share our stories, and two, whether we have that sense of, I don't know what you would call it, sense of calling or purpose that you would want to share. Where did that come from? The need to, or the urge to want to share your story?
The urge to share the story, I'd say it's a burden. You look outside of yourself. Of course, if I was only focused on me, I would say, oops, yes, Lord, you know, I'm on the other side. Thank you, Jesus, I made it. But I believe that God lays a burden in us, something that just doesn't cause you sleep, like literally. Where if you see, for example, now teenage pregnancy, it's very high. So for someone else, they might just look at it and think, oh, you know, these things happen. But for other people like me, where I feel that, first, I just want to touch that we can only go so far with our own will. To say that this is why the book, I don't even think we talk about the book. The reason why I say, you know, the waiting, it was on various aspects, whether career, but the one I'm talking about now is that I was a virgin until I got married at 35. So a lot of people might think it was based on will. You can only go so far with your own will. But I recall when I was in primary school, and there was an attempt of rape. And I said to God that I want to give you my body. Look after it. I mean, I'm committing my body to you. I'll do what I can. But I ask that you keep me pure before you. There are a lot of things that I had gone through even as a child. So I was saying, at least this one, Lord, please don't make it a scar for me. So when God is faithful enough to keep a promise that he makes to a young child for so many years, over 30 years, or maybe like 20 something, because I was probably like 8 when I said that, you realize that it wasn't your doing. So if it wasn't your doing, then when you see other people being victims or lacking the conviction or some other reasons,
sure,
you have this burden to say, especially in a world where there's so many voices being presented, voices that say it's your body, you know, do with it what you want. Voices that say, like, I just didn't have like someone who's going to talk about that they waited, you know, like as a virgin. It was actually a shameful thing for a long time in my life that I wasn't confident talking about, even till today. It's not something that you want to confidently talk about for some reason. There's a shame that comes with it, you know. So I wanted to be that voice to that Andiswa who's young, to say, God is faithful. If there are many voices, this is another voice. If there are many routes and choices, this is another choice that a person can make. So basically, that's what drove me. It's the responsibility and the gratitude to say, I made it, not because of my own will, but because of him who carried me through. And there are others he loves, just like he loved me. And he would want them to hear the same message so that some of them can get inspired. And some of them have actually indulged sexually already. But there's always a point where you can say, I want to commit my body to Christ and know that he will do, he has the ability and the grace to carry you until marriage.
Wow, that's very powerful. I mean, I must say, it's the first time I'm coming across the concept of committing your body to Christ, and I think it's very powerful, particularly as you say, given whatever voices may be there in the world that are saying so many different things. And I don't know if many people have come across. I mean, I think your book, in my view, can be very powerful, or probably has been very powerful for people to understand the concept that you can actually stay, as you say, a virgin for and commit your, you know, and in fact, it's almost like, I think I when I was reading your profile, it was interesting. You say it's almost like an unconventional route that you followed, because a lot of people, you know, if I put it like that, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm using the word, you know, it's not a popular route, you know, to follow. So it must have been very difficult. But I do want to ask this question about your upbringing, because you spoke about it earlier. And in reading through some of the, you know, the chapters and the pages, you know, I came across something which was very interesting for me about your university days, and what happened. And now we're getting into the book, I suppose. And at some point you ran away from home. I think it must be during your, I think during it. And really it was, reading that, and I don't want to say much, but I want you to say, but can you tell us about that journey of the point where you ran away from home? And I mean, it must have been a very difficult decision as well, to do that in the first place, and all of the challenges that you face. You mean you might not go through all of them, but there were challenges that even related to your virginity as well. There were you know, attempts, you know, to take it away and all of that. Can you maybe talk us through that experience? For me, it was like one of those. I thought, oh my God, what's going to happen next? You know, this person ran away from home. She's meeting strangers in the train station, stuff, you know, all of that. So yeah, I wanted us to talk maybe a bit about that.
Yeah. It's funny enough, that part of the story, it's a part that I've never spoken about. It's only existing locked in the book. Because it's such a sensitive one if you don't get the whole story behind it.
Okay.
So basically, you know, when we grow up, there are certain limitations in our understanding as children. So I grew up thinking that I wasn't loved, you know, by my mom, simply because I had a certain idea of what love ought to look like, right? So I struggled a lot after university. I struggled a lot to get pharmacy.
Okay.
So it wasn't, actually, that's when I feel like life really began. And I've seen in most cases for people that life really begins after matric. So once I passed, I realized that I couldn't get into pharmacy. So I fumbled basically trying to find my way in this big stage called life. And for some of us, you know, the benefit in our time now is that there's always someone who's going to hold your hand from high school, or you may have had some exposure already. But for us, I was the first generation in my house to go into a tertiary institution. So my mother, my parents, they had no idea what goes on in that space. So I think it contributed to my struggles. I had no one to turn to basically. So I went to vets, I didn't apply. I went to vets, like, yeah, I got there, I applied for pharmacy in January. And we know that, now we know that that will never happen.
Yeah.
But then I didn't know, you know, I'm in this big world. I come from a small village, you know, like it's the first time you really in a city and there are robots. Now it's like it's a far-fetched idea, but then that was my reality, and a reality for many people. So I'm at vets. I had someone helping me, a friend of a friend, or you know, a friend of a family. They took me to vets, and of course, vets was like, no, it's closed. So basically, in a nutshell, I struggled to get into pharmacy. I had to do BA, and I did something in filming. You don't even know how to choose at that time. Just chose something in filming. Yeah, it was just messy. And then, but the mindset behind that was that what they advised me, they said, do BA for now, and then maybe next year you'll get into pharmacy. So I did BA, passed BA. Then the following year, they said I applied it, and then they said no, you can't go in because most of my struggle was with the mathematics. Okay. So even though I had passed it, I think I passed it with like 50-something%. So it wasn't good enough. Yeah. So from BA, they said do BSc the following year. Did BSc, and they're saying the hope is for you to get into, you know, like pharmacy the following year. So when that didn't happen, my mom felt like, you know, I'm wasting, you know, like the money, the family home money and things like that. So I think it affected me mentally. And I had a deferred exam or something. So I went home having, you know, with my BSc, and I had a deferred exam. Now I'm at home. You know, sometimes parents can say a really harsh way. So there were certain harsh ways that my mom at the time had said to me that demotivated me. And already I felt like life was just not working out for me. So it's January of the following year. I'm supposed to be doing pharmacy, but obviously I'm not going to do pharmacy. I'm thinking everyone else from that I like my colleagues, they are well advanced in life by now, and I'm still battling with second year of nothing. So I went to write at VET, that deferred exam. I didn't even wait for them to, I mean, like bring the results back. My mom was already so upset. And I could see that, obviously, they'd said, I can't get into pharmacy again. So I was like, okay, this is the end of the world. Contemplated suicide. But because I was so afraid, I was fearful of God, I'd learned that Roman Catholics, that there's hell and there's heaven. And no way I wanted to end up in hell. So I was like, okay, like let's just find a way around here. So that's how I ended up, like on a spur of a moment, after wanting to commit suicide and not being successful, I decided I'm running away from home. I can't go back home to face them because I still can't say, here's a degree, like an official degree. Now, here's pharmacy. I got into pharmacy. I have nothing to show for it. And I felt like I've wasted the money and things. So I decided to run away from home. So I ran away from home. It just came to my mind that, okay, just go and visit a friend that you grew up with, like a long time ago. So I scrambled to check my diary. There were diaries that time, and found my friend's book, number. I called it and I'm like, Sissy, I'm coming. I'm coming to Cape Town to see you. So I booked a bus with the money I was supposed to use to go back home, booked a bus to Cape Town. Never been there. Got to Cape Town. She came to see me. Yeah. So basically, I was trying to do, I don't want to reveal much about the book, but to your point now, what happened, the near rape experience now, I think that, you know, when you come from a rural area, sometimes you're not exposed much. There are things that you don't know. So if you go and stay at a neighbor's place, you think, you know, it's safe. That's what we thought back then anyway. So that's what I did. I ended up in Cape Town with these ladies, but now I wanted to do like what do they call it? To improve my results in some college. So I registered in this college, and a friend of mine from there linked me with a brother. So and said, okay, there's a guy that they know that I can stay with. He's married, don't worry. He's a pastor. Like, oh, okay, great. Went to stay with this pastor. Was it took God. The things that I got exposed to there, it took God's grace. Like literally, there was a time where I called on God and I said, remember me. Remember the promise that you made. And there was a near rape experience. So I left, I ran away from this house again. And then, but I didn't know where to go now. I have no parents. I can't go back to my friend's place. I'm studying now. So that's when I ended up in a train station with only 10 Rand. I think about 10 Rand in my pocket. And I had no idea what to do. I literally just sat there and I said, Lord, now you decide. I don't know what to do.
Let's not reveal too much so that the readers, so that viewers can go and buy the book. They must go and buy the book and find out what happened after the train station. Yes. But thank you for sharing that. I mean, I like what you're saying. Of course, you say it's a chapter or a section of the book or whatever that you kind of like are focused on, and you've said it's locked in and you've never. But I'm happy that we have been able to have this conversation for you to talk about that as well. Let's talk about the journey of getting to marriage and all of that now. And I, you know, you say at some point, I can't remember the exact age, you gave your life to Jesus in your 20s, and then you said I do in your 30s. So that's like over probably a decade of 10 years or more than that, you know, up to the point of getting married. And I don't know, maybe I wanted to get a sense, you know, from you, because we spoke earlier about the fact that probably the unconventional route, and of course there are many challenges we are facing along the way, and just to also help people who may, you know, be in that journey of waiting, particularly as it relates to marriage, you know, some of the challenges that you encountered along the way. How did you feel? I mean, how was that experience of waiting? You know, of course, you speak about waiting generally, and you know, as it relates to, as you're saying, to careers and other aspects of life. But as it relates to this unconventional route, if you use that word mostly, how was that experience for you up to that point? You know, did it take too long? You know, how was it frustrating? You know, just can we understand what that felt like for you?
Yeah. Waiting for me, it was both, it had exciting moments.
Okay.
And also gut-wrenching, painful moments where exciting in the adventures with God, the processes of walking with Him and discovering who I was and who He was, the adventures of the impact that I watched Him have through my life, you know. So that was the exciting part of it. But obviously, I'm a woman. I a beautiful woman at that. So there were moments of pain, of feeling alone, of making mistakes, of having my own Isaacs. As Christians, we know what that means, right? Where there's a promise and there's what looks like a promise. And me in my impatience and not staying enough to hear exactly what the Lord was saying, eventually making mistakes. and having to bear the consequences of that as well.
Sure.
And I think now looking back, the delay was longer, not just because of the processes that God wanted to take me through, that all of us have to go through, that are necessary for marriage, that I believe that you should not skip, you know, but also because in my own flesh, I made some mistakes and took some detours. And obviously from those mistakes, I had to go through processes of healing. There is no way God will allow you to jump from one relationship to another. You know, so there had to be a process of separation, of healing that had to take place in order for me to get to that state. So I'd say that the process was longer because of the processes that are necessary for us when we're waiting on God. But also I contributed in those detours and making the processes longer as well. So yes, it was painful. It's painful to wait. I mean, it's painful to wait even for a child, a job. So marriage, especially when you don't have, most of us think that marriage is like a trophy that you get for being a good girl, a good man, like well done, good and faithful servant. Yeah, now you earn the trophy, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an achievement, and it isn't. I think if I had one thing to say to anyone who is in the waiting, to encourage them, is that don't look at it as an achievement. You are loved even in this process. In fact, God loves you so much because he knows you, that there are certain processes that are required. There are certain scales that ought to fall off, you know, certain behavioral patterns that, if not dealt with now, they will have a way of getting into marriage. Do you understand? So my encouragement would be that you are loved by God. You should actually thank God that he loves you enough to allow you to go through through these processes, and also to say, at the right time, the promise will speak. It will not tarry. It will speak. Yes.
That's very interesting. Thank you for that. In fact, you started to speak now about, I was going to ask you, what would you say to someone who's walking that journey currently? And you started to speak about it. And I also want to link this to, because I mean, in my own experience as well, of course, I'm married and, you know, now, and I can't speak for a single man or woman who's in the way. So I don't know what it feels like, but it always appears to me that there's also some level of panic and anxiety about age as well. For example, you say you said I do at 35, and so someone who's sitting at close to 40 years now probably is and of course they trust God. And they almost feel like, okay, because they also perhaps want to have children as well. You know, so they're like, what? And so what do you say to that person? Because of course they understand, but there's this anxiety and worry that, am I going to have children at some point if I'm now going to 40 or 42 years old and I'm still not married? You know, all of those questions that they may have.
Yeah, that is so real. It is so real. I remember, for some reason, I didn't worry about having children. But I remember God giving me a promise once out of the blue. And that promise became very important about me, that I would have children one day. I'm mentioning it to say, at this time, you know, the word of God lifts his word above his name. He will honor his word. So one of the things that you ought to do in this time is to get a word for your situation. I'll tell you why. Just a little testimony. So I got married. I was 35. And if you're a woman, you already know, when you go to the hospital, they're going to classify you as high risk, right? And in both pregnancies, they were not easy pregnancies, to a point that, like, the first one, I almost miscarried, and I was going through it.
Oh.
And then I remember the doctor saying to me that, yeah, it's you people, you decide to choose careers, pursue careers when you're supposed to be pursuing marriage. When you're supposed to be pursuing marriage. I looked at him and I said, no, not me.
Yeah.
I waited on God. I am in this situation because of God. So when that happened now, I went back home and I could go to God and say, I waited on you. Do you understand?
Put it back on him.
You made me a promise. You made me a promise that I will have children. And therefore, here's my child in my womb. Now I could, like speak to him and speak the word of God over that and say, me and my husband got home, we went on our knees. And we said, if God be true, God be true, this child will live. Because he doesn't start anything, he will not finish.
Yeah, that must have been very, it must have been very intense as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very intense. So that happened and also happened for the second one. So I'm speaking to those that are worried. You gotta have a stubborn faith. Our God is not a liar. He is who he says he is. You know what I mean? He is who he says he is. And the things that he said he will do. For me, my comfort is, who am I waiting for? I could easily decide that here's a man, get married. But I didn't do that. I waited on God and I waited in him to follow his processes and honor his covenant. So he's bound by that. So if that is my confidence. So I want to ask the other person on the other side also, if you are going to 35 and 40, I understand the body will speak. You know what I mean? They will tell you about your body and your ovaries you know what I mean? But for us as believers, we need to get to a stage where we say, let God be true and every man a liar. If he says this, therefore he will do that. Because if he's the same man, women stop ovulating and go on menopause. But the same God who created a body that goes on menopause where you're unable to have children is the same God who had Sarah way past age bearing stage. So did that God of Sarah, is he not the same God as our God now? He's still the same God. And one of the things that should encourage us or even trigger us is that you could have the same.
Go ahead, don't worry.
You could have the same. About?
No, I'm saying continue.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you could have the same situation and have two different people coming and being faced with the same situation and coming out with different results. The last one, they said I must actually remove her. And I didn't. But I know someone else who would have thought that they should remove her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you will have people who are 50 who are bearing children. What is the difference between them and you? You know what I mean? So I want to encourage people. I think it's time that we take God at his word. And that is how we're going to do this Christianity successfully. Otherwise, so that we don't run the risk where doctors advise us to do artificial insemination and say that, which are things that are happening now. A person is a Christian, the doctor said this and that, and they decided not to get married because the man is not coming, and they just decide to have a baby instead. Is that God's design? I ask, you know what I mean? So I think that is a call for us as Christians. If we want to do Christianity, let's do Christianity.
Thank you so much. I think let's close it here. And I'm quite I'm very inspired, to be honest. I mean, you mentioned stubborn faith, and you mentioned also something about the God the God that could do it for Sarah can do it for you as well. You know, I think that's very powerful because, as I say, you know, my sense has always been that people start to panic because of time. And I do want to thank you for sharing your story, firstly. And I do believe that it will inspire others. Even me, you know, as a man who's already married, all of that, I look forward to reading the full book and getting to know, and you know, because we can learn so many things about faith. You know, it's not having arrived type of thing, you know, through your own experience. And I do hope that you inspire even other people. And so I do want to at this point say thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your journey. I wish this conversation could go on for another 30 minutes, but unfortunately we allow only 30 minutes for you know, for this segment, and we'll see how they go. If we feel we need to extend, we will extend. But thank you so much for sharing your, you know, your journey with the world. I know it's not easy to share your, you know, your own perspective. You want to hide your own, you know, not hide, but it's not comfortable. Sometimes it's not comfortable to write about your own journey. So I do want to thank you and your family, your husband, and your children as well for, you know, allowing you to share this journey. And I do wish you nothing but the best, and pray blessing over your family and everything, that even the Calame Royale and the career and everything else. And I do know it will help edify a lot of people. Thank you so much, Andiswa, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Kaya. Thank you. I speak blessings over your ministry as well. May it touch many people's lives, and may God take you from strength to strength.
Thank you so much. That one thing I forgot though, before we close, can you please put up the book? We just want to see it. And can you just in 30 seconds tell us where people can get your book? Therefore, yeah, we can see clearly. And where can we buy the book? Quickly.
So yeah, how I sell it right now is, unfortunately, like I sell it through PEP. Okay. So if a person sends me a WhatsApp, if they send me a WhatsApp, then we can start communication from there. Then they can get a direct delivery to the closest PEP to them. That's how I'm selling it.
An email address that helps that you use, or you just use WhatsApp? Yeah,
even the email address. Sorry?
Is there a specific email address that you want to call out that people can use?
They can use Havila.
Okay. Sorry? No, I'm saying to order the book. What is the email address that they can use to order the book?
Yes, the email address that they can use is andiswa@havilagold.org.
Okay, that's fine.
Andiswa@havilagold.
We can get that from you as well after the interview, and then we can put it on our page so that people can write directly to you. Okay.
Yes.
So thank you so much
from that point.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us, and also have a blessed Sunday further. Well.
Yes. Thank you. You too.
Bye.